She was 7 months
Trade your
pregnant
shares
when
are
her
worth
billionaire
nothing.
husband looked her in the eyes and said
We
four
closed the
words that destroyed her
acquisition
world.
last night.
Get out of my house. No warning, no explanation, just a 24-year-old mistress standing behind him and divorce papers in his hand. He gave her $50,000, called it severance, 12 years of marriage reduced to a check and a slammed door. But here's what Preston Mercer didn't know. He didn't just throw out his pregnant wife that night. He threw out a woman who would build an empire from the ashes of her broken heart. A woman who would turn his cruelty into fuel. A woman who would become worth $400 million while he lost everything. And 5 years later, when he walked into a job interview desperate for work, he had no idea who was sitting behind that desk waiting for him. His ex-wife, the one he called worthless, the one who now owned the company. What happened next will leave you speechless. Stay with me until the end. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Get out of my house. The words sliced through the air like shards of broken glass. Vivian Mercer stood frozen in the marble foyer of their $12 million Hamptons estate, her hand pressed against her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant, the baby kicked hard, as if sensing the danger that had just walked through the front door. Preston stood 10 feet away. His Italian leather shoes gleamed under the crystal chandelier. His jaw was set in that hard line she had learned to fear over the years. His eyes were cold, dead, like looking into the eyes of a stranger. Behind him, half hidden in the shadows of the living room archway, stood a woman Vivian had never seen before. Young, blonde, beautiful in that Instagram-filtered way that made everyone look the same. Perfect contour, perfect lashes, perfect everything. The woman wore a cream silk dress that probably cost more than most people paid in rent for 3 months. Her hand rested on Preston's arm with easy familiarity, comfortable, practiced, like she had done it 1,000 times before. Preston, Vivian's voice cracked. She hated how weak she sounded, how pathetic. What are you talking about? Who is this woman? You heard me? He adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous habit she had noticed 1,000 times before. At their wedding when he said his vows, during business deals, when he was about to close something big, when he was lying. The papers are already filed. The house goes to me. You have 24 hours to collect your personal items. The baby blanket slipped from Vivian's fingers. It landed on the cold marble floor with a soft whisper. She had been embroidering it for 3 months. Yellow ducks, gender neutral. They had decided to be surprised about the baby's gender. One of the few decisions they had made together in years. I don't understand. The words came out small, barely above a whisper. She sounded like a child begging for an explanation. Preston, please talk to me. Whatever this is, we can work through it. We've been married for 12 years. 12 years. The blonde woman stepped forward into the light. Up close, she was even younger than Vivian had first thought. 24 maybe. 25 at most. Her skin had that dewy freshness that came from never having known a single day of real struggle. Maybe we should give her a moment, babe. Her voice was sweet, practiced. The casual intimacy of that single word hit Vivian like a physical blow. Babe. Not Preston, not Mr. Mercer. Babe. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness that they could work through in couples therapy. This had been happening for months, maybe years. How long? Vivian whispered. Her legs felt like they were made of water. The room tilted slightly. The chandelier above them sparkled like it always did, throwing rainbow fragments across the white walls. She had picked that chandelier herself, spent 3 weeks choosing between Venetian and Bohemian crystal, argued with the interior designer about the perfect height, worried about whether it would look too ostentatious. None of that mattered now. How long, Preston? How long have you been seeing her? Preston didn't answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. Thick, official, the kind of envelope that changed lives. He held it out like he was offering her a business proposal instead of the destruction of everything she had built. Everything's in here. Divorce papers, the settlement agreement. I've had the lawyers working on this for months. It's all very straightforward. He paused. His voice was flat, rehearsed. He had practiced this, probably in front of a mirror. probably with her watching. There's also a check, $50,000, consider it severance. Severance, 12 years of marriage, 4,380 days. She had counted them once during their 10th anniversary trip to the Maldives. She had thought they were happy then. She had thought they would grow old together, reduced to severance, like she was an employee being let go, like their entire life together was just a job that hadn't worked out. Vivian didn't take the envelope. Her arms wouldn't move. Her brain couldn't process what was happening. The baby kicked again, harder this time, more insistent. "You can't do this." Her voice rose, cracked. She could hear the desperation in it and hated herself for it. "I'm pregnant, Preston, with your child, our child. The lawyers will handle custody arrangements." His tone didn't change, didn't soften. It was like he was reading from a script. "Amber and I are getting married as soon as the divorce is finalized. We're planning a spring wedding. Positano, small ceremony, just close friends." Amber. So that was her name. Vivian finally looked at her, really looked, studied her face like she was trying to memorize it for a police report. High cheekbones, pouty lips, the kind of bone structure that photographed well from every angle. The kind of woman who made other women feel inadequate just by existing. "How long?" Vivian asked again. This time her voice was stronger. She needed to know. She needed to understand the full scope of her humiliation. Amber glanced at Preston. A silent conversation passed between them. The kind of look that only came from intimacy, from shared secrets, from pillow talk and private jokes in 1,000 small moments that should have belonged to Vivian. 2 years, Preston said finally. Give or take. 2 years, 730 days. While Vivian was planning their anniversary dinners, while she was decorating the nursery, while she was trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect everything. 2 years. She thought about all the business trips, the conferences in Miami, the client meetings in Los Angeles, the late nights at the office when she would fall asleep waiting for him and wake up alone at 2 in the morning. The charity galas she had been too tired to attend. He had told her to rest, take care of herself, take care of the baby. He had been with Amber instead. Something warm and wet trickled down Vivian's leg. For one horrible moment, she thought she had lost control of her bladder from the shock. Then the cramp hit, sharp, sudden, terrifying. It radiated from her lower back around to her abdomen, squeezing like a fist. Oh God! She doubled over, one hand on her belly, the other reaching for the wall. Something's wrong, Preston, something's wrong with the baby. For one brief second, something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. Or just the inconvenience of his perfectly planned exit being disrupted by a medical emergency. Then it was gone, replaced by that same cold mask. "Call an ambulance," he said to Amber. His voice was steady, controlled, like he was dealing with a minor inconvenience at a board meeting. "And then call my lawyer, tell him we might need to delay the filing." Delay the filing. His wife was collapsing on the floor, possibly losing their baby, and he was worried about the timing of the divorce papers. The next 3 hours blurred together like a fever dream. Ambulance lights strobing against the white walls of the foyer, paramedics asking questions she couldn't answer, the stretcher cold and hard beneath her back, sirens wailing as they raced through the Hampton streets toward Southampton Hospital. Preston didn't come with her. He stood in the doorway of their house, Amber's hand on his arm, watching the ambulance pull away. Vivian stared at his face through the small back window until he disappeared from view. She never saw that house again. The hospital corridor was bright, too bright. The fluorescent lights hurt her eyes. Nurses in scrubs appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Someone was asking about her medical history. Someone else was hooking her up to machines that beeped and whirred and tracked the baby's heartbeat. "Is there anyone we can call?" A nurse with kind eyes and gray hair leaned over her. "The father?" Vivian shook her head. Tears streamed down her face. She couldn't speak. "Anyone else? Family? A friend?" "My mother." The words came out in a croak. "Dorothy Crawford. She's in Connecticut." Her mother arrived at 2 in the morning. She had driven 4 hours through a rainstorm, probably breaking every speed limit along the way. When she burst through the door of Vivian's hospital room, her face was white with fear and streaked with tears. "The baby's okay," Vivian said before her mother could ask. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "They stopped the contractions. Some kind of medication. But I have to stay on bed rest until my due date." Dorothy Crawford was 58 years old, a retired school teacher who had spent 30 years shaping young minds in a small Connecticut town. She had buried her husband when Vivian was 17, raised her daughter alone through the rest of high school and college, watched her marry a man who never quite felt right, no matter how much money he had. She sat on the edge of the hospital bed, took Vivian's hand in both of hers. Her fingers were cold from the rain, but her grip was strong. "Where is he?" "He's not coming." Vivian's voice broke on the last word. "Mom, he threw me out. He's been having an affair for 2 years. Her name is Amber. She's 24. An Instagram influencer. He wants a divorce." Dorothy was silent for a long moment. The hospital machines beeped steadily. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. The sound of it made Vivian's heart clench. "Then he's a fool," Dorothy said finally. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of a woman who had survived worse and knew her daughter would survive this too. "And you're coming home with me." Vivian nodded. There was nothing else to say, nothing else to do. 3 days later, she was discharged. A nurse wheeled her to the exit while Dorothy pulled the car around. Vivian had nothing with her except the clothes she had been wearing that night and the manila envelope Preston had given her. She still hadn't opened it. The check for $50,000 sat inside it like a snake waiting to strike. On the 4-hour drive back to Connecticut, Vivian's phone buzzed constantly. Text messages and voicemails piled up like digital debris. Not Preston, never Preston. He hadn't tried to contact her once since that night. The messages were from friends who had heard rumors, colleagues from her old marketing job, the career she had given up when Preston convinced her she didn't need to work. His money was enough for both of them, he had said. His career was important. Hers was just a hobby. Why would she want to waste her talent on a 9-to-5 when she could be supporting him? She had believed him. God help her, she had believed every word. The Connecticut house looked exactly the same as it had when she was a teenager. White clapboard siding, green shutters that her father had painted every spring, a wraparound porch where she had spent countless summer evenings reading novels and dreaming about the future. Her childhood bedroom was a time capsule. Same lavender walls, same white eyelet curtains her mother had made by hand, same bookshelf filled with paperbacks she had read 100 times. Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, Little Women. Stories about women who found love and lived happily ever after. How naive she had been. That night, lying in her narrow twin bed with the baby pressing against her ribs, Vivian finally opened the envelope. The divorce papers were 37 pages long. Legal jargon filled every line. Words like irreconcilable differences and equitable distribution in custody arrangement jumped off the pages. The lawyers had been thorough. Every asset, every account, every property, all cataloged, all claimed. Zerpone, Preston's. The prenuptial agreement was attached. She remembered signing it a week before their wedding, 23 years old. So in love she couldn't see straight. So certain that Preston Mercer was her happily ever after. "It's just a formality," he had said, sliding the document across the table at his lawyer's office. "Something my family insists on. Old money, you know. They're protective, but it doesn't mean anything. What's mine is yours, Viv." That's how marriage works. She hadn't even read it, just signed on the dotted line and smiled up at him like he had given her a gift instead of a trap. Now she read every word. In the event of dissolution of marriage, each party shall retain sole ownership of assets acquired prior to and during the marriage in their respective names. Everything was in Preston's name. The houses, the cars, the investment accounts, the real estate empire he had inherited from his father and grown into a billion-dollar portfolio. Everything. Vivian had given up her career, her friends, her independence, her identity, and in exchange, she got $50,000 and a handshake. Severance. She picked up her phone, checked it for the 100th time since leaving the hospital. Lock screen, unlock, lock screen, unlock, lock screen, unlock. No messages from Preston, no apology, No explanation, no acknowledgement that she existed at all. She was waiting for something that would never come. A call, a text, some sign that 12 years of marriage had meant something to him. Anything. At 3 in the morning, she stopped waiting. She set the phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The old house creaked around her. The wind rattled the shutters. The baby shifted inside her, settling into a new position. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her belly, to the child who would never know its father, to the future she had imagined and lost. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." The ceiling had cracks in it. She hadn't noticed them before. They spread across the plaster like fault lines, like the foundation of her entire life was about to split apart. Maybe it already had. 2 weeks passed like a fever dream. Vivian stayed in bed most of the time. Doctor's orders. The baby needed to stay put for at least another month. Any stress, any exertion could trigger another round of premature contractions. So she lay there, hour after hour, day after day, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster, trying to figure out where her life had gone so terribly, irrevocably wrong. Her mother brought her meals on a tray: chicken soup, turkey sandwiches, tea with honey. Vivian ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. Her body needed nutrition for the baby, even if she had no appetite for herself. She slept too much and not enough. Strange dreams plagued her. Preston and Amber laughing at a candle-lit dinner, her own wedding, but the groom's face was blank, featureless. Running down an endless corridor, heavily pregnant, unable to find the exit. She woke from these dreams gasping, her hand on her belly, checking that the baby was still there. Still moving, still alive. On day 15, Charlotte Reeves arrived. Charlie had been Vivian's college roommate at Boston University. They had shared a tiny dorm room freshman year, survived final exams together, gotten drunk on cheap wine, and complained about boys who didn't deserve them. Through the years, they had stayed close even as their lives diverged. Charlie had gone to law school, become a divorce attorney at a prestigious Manhattan firm. Vivian had become a billionaire's wife. Now Charlie sat on the edge of Vivian's childhood bed, her designer briefcase open beside her, legal documents spread across the quilt like a paper minefield. "I've reviewed everything," Charlie said. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. This was her professional face, the face she wore in courtrooms when she was about to destroy opposing counsel. "I won't sugarcoat it, Viv. It's bad." "How bad?" "The prenup is ironclad. Preston's lawyers drafted it specifically to protect his assets in case of divorce. They knew exactly what they were doing." Charlie picked up one of the documents, her manicured nail tracing a particular clause. "You waived rights to alimony. You waived rights to any appreciation in value of his holdings during the marriage. You waived rights to any property acquired during the marriage unless it was specifically titled in your name." "Nothing was in my name." "I know." Charlie's hand found hers, squeezed gently. "You basically waived rights to everything. The $50,000 he offered you? Technically, he didn't even have to give you that. It's a voluntary settlement, not a legal obligation." Vivian closed her eyes. The room spun slightly. "I was 23 years old. I didn't understand what I was signing. He told me it was just a formality. He told me it didn't mean anything." "I know, honey, but legally that doesn't matter. You signed it of your own free will. You weren't coerced. You weren't under duress. You had the opportunity to consult your own attorney." Charlie's voice softened further. "Did you?" "No, Preston said it wasn't necessary. He said we were a team. He said what was his was mine. He said only couples who didn't trust each other needed separate lawyers. But he never actually put anything in your name." "No." The word hung in the air between them. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of being Mrs. Preston Mercer. And Vivian had nothing to show for it except a growing belly, a broken heart, and a check that felt more like an insult than a settlement. "There's more," Charlie said quietly. "I did some digging, called in a few favors, asked some people who know people." "What did you find?" "Preston has been hiding assets for years, moving money through shell companies, offshore accounts in the Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore. It's not technically illegal, just extremely clever tax planning. The kind of clever that requires years of preparation." Charlie met Vivian's eyes. He's been planning for this divorce for a long time, Viv. Maybe since the beginning. The room tilted. Vivian gripped the sheets until her knuckles turned white. That's not possible. He loved me. In the beginning, he loved me. I know he did. Maybe. Charlie's voice was soft. Careful. The voice she probably used with clients who didn't want to hear the truth. Or maybe you loved him so much that you couldn't see what he really was. Maybe you saw what you wanted to see because the alternative was too painful to consider. Vivian thought about their early years, the surprise trips to Paris for the weekend, the flowers that arrived at her office every Friday, the way Preston used to look at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. When had that stopped? She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It had happened so gradually, like a photograph fading in the sun. The compliments became less frequent, then stopped entirely. The flowers stopped coming. The weekend trips became business obligations she wasn't invited to join. The partnership became a power imbalance so subtle she hadn't noticed it until she was already trapped. What about Amber? Vivian asked. You said 2 years. Has she really been around that long? Charlie nodded slowly. According to my sources, they met at a charity gala almost 3 years ago. Some fundraiser for children's hospitals. Ironic, right? Started seeing each other about 6 months later. She's an Instagram influencer. 42,000 followers, last I checked. Mostly bikini shots and sponsored posts for teeth whitening products and detox teas. 3 years, not 2. Preston had lied even about that. The business trips, Vivian said slowly. Understanding dawning like a cold gray morning. All those conferences I was too tired to attend. All those client dinners that ran late. All those weekends he had to stay in the city for meetings. She was there, at most of them. Sometimes they were spotted together at restaurants, clubs, events. Charlie hesitated. I have photos, if you want to see them. Vivian shook her head. She didn't need to see photographs to believe what she already knew was true. I'm not crazy. The words came out suddenly, fierce. I'm not crazy, Charlie. I knew something was wrong. For years I felt it. This distance between us that I couldn't explain. But every time I tried to talk to him about it, he made me feel like I was being paranoid, insecure, ungrateful. You're not crazy, Charlie agreed. You're the victim of a very calculated man who never saw you as an equal partner. Only as an accessory, a pretty decoration for his arm at parties, a prop in the performance of his perfect life. The baby kicked hard, right against Vivian's ribs. She pressed her hand against the spot and felt the tiny foot press back, insistent, alive. What do I do now? You survive. Charlie squeezed her hand again. You have this baby. You heal. You give yourself time to grieve what you lost. And then, when you're ready, you figure out who Vivian Crawford is without Preston Mercer attached to her name. Crawford. Her maiden name. She hadn't thought of herself as Vivian Crawford in 12 years, since the day she had signed the marriage license and legally become someone else. Maybe it was time to remember who she used to be. That night, after Charlie had gone back to the city with promises to call tomorrow and the day after that, and every day until Vivian told her to stop, sleep wouldn't come. Vivian's mind raced through memories like a projector stuck on fast forward. Their first date at a rooftop restaurant in Manhattan. Their wedding at the Pierre Hotel, 300 guests, a $20,000 dress. The night she told him she was pregnant. He had smiled, kissed her, said all the right things. This is wonderful, Viv, a baby, our baby. I've never been happier. But had he meant any of it? Or had she been watching a performance all along? She got up carefully. The baby was heavy now, pressing down on her pelvis with every step. Her back ached constantly. Her feet had swollen to the point where only flip-flops fit. She shuffled to her old desk in the corner of the room and opened her laptop. It was ancient by technology standards, a model she had bought during her senior year of college. She hadn't used it in years. Preston had always handled their technology needs. The latest iPhones, the newest MacBooks. Everything synced to his accounts, his cloud, his control. This laptop was the one thing that was purely hers. The one digital space Preston had never accessed. She logged into her old email account. The one from college that she had kept all these years out of nostalgia. The one Preston didn't know about. Messages filled the screen. Hundreds of them, accumulated over years of neglect. Industry newsletters for marketing professionals. Conference announcements she would never attend. Alumni updates from Boston University. And buried among the spam and the updates, messages from people she had forgotten. Former colleagues, headhunters who had tried to recruit her. Opportunities she had dismissed without a second thought because Preston said she didn't need to work. One email caught her eye, from 3 years ago, her old boss at the marketing firm where she had worked before the wedding. "Viv, I heard you're not working anymore. If you ever change your mind, there's always a place for you here. You were one of the best strategic minds I ever worked with. The campaigns you created were innovative, fresh, exactly what clients wanted. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But someone had. Preston had convinced her that her career was small, unimportant, that her ideas were cute but impractical, that the best thing she could do was support his success and enjoy the lifestyle it provided. He had been wrong about a lot of things. "He didn't just take my money," Vivian whispered to the empty room. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness. "He took my years. He took my confidence. He took my identity. The hardest part is admitting I knew all along." She had known. Deep down in that place where women store the truths they're afraid to acknowledge, she had known something was wrong, known that her marriage was hollow, known that Preston's affection had faded to indifference and then to something that looked a lot like contempt. But she had stayed anyway, because it was easier, because it was comfortable, because starting over at 31, pregnant and alone, seemed impossible. Now she didn't have a choice. Her mother's voice came from the doorway, soft with concern. "Vivian, why are you up?" The doctor said bed rest. Dorothy stood in her faded bathrobe, silver hair mussed from sleep. She looked older than Vivian remembered, worry lines carved deeper around her eyes and mouth. "I couldn't sleep." Her mother crossed the room and put her hands on Vivian's shoulders. Warm, steady, the same hands that had braided her hair as a child, bandaged her scraped knees, held her when she cried over boys who didn't deserve her tears. "You need to rest. The baby needs rest." "I know, but Mom, I've been resting for 12 years. Resting while Preston made all the decisions. Resting while my whole life slipped away from me. Resting while I turned into someone I don't even recognize." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. The old house creaked around them. Wind whispered against the windows. "You know what I thought when you called me from that hospital?" she said finally. "When I was driving through that rainstorm, terrified out of my mind." "What?" "I thought, thank God. Thank God this happened now, while you're still young enough to start over. Thank God that man finally showed you who he really was before you wasted another 12 years pretending to be happy." Vivian turned to face her mother. "You knew?" "I suspected. A mother always knows when her daughter isn't truly happy. No matter how big the house, no matter how expensive the vacations. I watched you shrink over the years, Vivian. Watched you become quieter, more careful, always second-guessing yourself. That's not who you used to be." "Who was I?" "You were fierce." Dorothy smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You were ambitious and creative and so sure of yourself. You had dreams, sweetheart. Big dreams about building something of your own, remember?" Vivian did remember, vaguely, like memories from a past life. "Come back to bed," her mother said, guiding her gently toward the narrow twin mattress. "Tomorrow is a new day, and you have your whole life ahead of you. This isn't the end, Vivian. This is the beginning." Vivian let her mother tuck her in like she was a child again. The sheets smelled like lavender fabric softener, the same scent from her childhood. Safe, familiar, home. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart. Now sleep. Things will look different in the morning." Vivian closed her eyes. Her mother's footsteps retreated down the hallway. The house settled into silence. Somewhere along the way, I became invisible, and I let it happen. But she wasn't invisible anymore. Preston had thrown her away, and in doing so, he had set her free. She just had to figure out what to do with that freedom. Oliver James Crawford came into the world screaming at the top of his tiny lungs on a Tuesday morning in late October. 20 hours of labor. Vivian had never experienced pain like that. Waves of agony that crashed over her, receded, and crashed again. Her mother held her hand through every contraction, wiping sweat from her forehead, murmuring encouragement when Vivian wanted to give up. Charlie arrived during the final hour, still in her court clothes from a deposition she had walked out on when she got the text. She burst through the delivery room door just in time to see Vivian make her final push. "You're doing amazing," the nurse said. "One more. Just one more. I can see the head." Vivian pushed with everything she had left. Her vision blurred. Her muscles screamed. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. And then there was weight on her chest, warmth. A tiny red face with a rosebud mouth, wailing at the indignity of being born. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. "Congratulations, Miss Crawford. You have a healthy baby boy." Oliver, she had chosen the name weeks ago during those long nights of staring at the ceiling and wondering how she would survive this. Oliver Twist. A child who started with nothing and fought his way to something. It seemed appropriate. "He's perfect," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Vivian, he's absolutely perfect." Charlie leaned over the bed, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. "He looks just like you, Viv. Thank God he doesn't look anything like his father." The nurse approached with her clipboard, all business efficiency. "We'll need the father's information for the birth certificate, his name, date of birth, social security number if you have it." Vivian looked at her son. His eyes were squeezed shut against the bright lights, his tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb with surprising strength. He had no idea that his father was somewhere in the Hamptons, probably celebrating his upcoming wedding to a 24-year-old influencer. No idea that he had been thrown away before he was even born. "Put the father as unknown," Vivian said. The nurse blinked. "Are you sure? It's much easier to establish paternity now than later if you ever need—" "I'm sure," her voice was steady, certain. "This is my son, just mine." The nurse nodded slowly and made a note on her clipboard. Charlie raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Dorothy understood. "You're protecting him. I'm protecting both of us. Someday he'll ask about his father, and I'll tell him the truth, all of it, but for now, I want him to know that he was wanted, that he was enough, that he doesn't need anyone else's name or approval or presence to be valuable." Oliver's crying faded to soft hiccups, then to silence. He nestled against her chest, finding the warmth of her heartbeat. His breathing evened out, peaceful, trusting. "Welcome to the world, little one," Vivian whispered against his downy head. "I promise you, we're going to be okay." The first weeks of motherhood were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and sleepless nights that blended into sleepless days. Vivian's body ached in new ways. Her breasts were constantly sore from nursing. Her stitches pulled with every movement. Her emotions swung wildly from overwhelming love to paralyzing fear and back again, sometimes within the span of a single minute. But Oliver was healthy. That was all that mattered. He gained weight steadily. He started to focus on faces, tracking movement with his dark eyes. He smiled for the first time at 6 weeks, a gummy grin that made Vivian cry for 20 minutes. Her mother helped constantly, making bottles of pumped milk when Vivian needed to sleep, doing endless loads of tiny laundry, taking over when Vivian collapsed from exhaustion and couldn't get up again. "You don't have to do this alone," Dorothy reminded her every day. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "I know, Mom. I just feel like I should be able to handle it. Other women manage. Why can't I?" Other women don't do this alone either, even if it looks that way from the outside. Everyone needs help. Accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It was during one of those brief respites, when Oliver was sleeping and her mother had insisted she rest, that Vivian found herself unable to stop her racing mind. Instead of sleeping, she opened her laptop and started scrolling through old photos. Her wedding day. She had been so beautiful in that $20,000 dress. So happy. So certain that she was living her fairy tale. The honeymoon in Bali. Infinity pools overlooking rice terraces. Candlelit dinners on private beaches. Preston's hand in hers as they walked through ancient temples. Anniversary dinners at restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Vacations in private villas. Galas and fundraisers where she had worn designer gowns and smiled for photographers. She had been happy, or at least she had thought she was happy. Now, looking at these photos with fresh eyes, she saw things she had missed before. The way Preston's smile never quite reached his eyes. The tension in her own shoulders, even in candid shots. The gradual dimming of her spirit over 12 years, visible in the progression of photographs. There was a photo from year 3 of their marriage, a company party at some art gallery. Vivian was wearing a red dress that Preston had picked out for her. "You look stunning," he had said when she put it on that night. But then, just before they left, he had added, "Although maybe next time go easier on the dessert. That dress is looking a little snug." She had skipped dinner that night and the next, and eventually she had developed habits around food that took years to unravel. There was a photo from year 7. Another party, another forced smile. By then she had stopped suggesting activities for them to do together, stopped offering opinions on decorating decisions, stopped sharing ideas about anything, really. Every suggestion was met with dismissal or criticism. It was easier to be quiet. By year 12, the woman in the photos was a stranger, a hollow shell wearing expensive clothes and performing happiness for the camera. Her eyes were flat. Her smile was practiced. She looked like an actress, playing a role she had grown tired of long ago. "I'm sorry," Vivian whispered to that woman in the photographs. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have gotten you out." Oliver cried from his bassinet, hungry again. Vivian closed the laptop and went to him, lifting his small, warm body to her shoulder. "I promise you something," she said softly as she settled into the nursing chair. "You're going to have a better life than this. Better than what I settled for. Better than what I thought I deserved." He latched on and began to nurse, his tiny fist curled against her breast. She stroked his downy hair and stared out the window at the October sky. "I'm going to build something. Something that's mine. Something no one can take away. And when you're older, you'll know that your mother wasn't just Preston Mercer's ex-wife. You'll know she was someone in her own right. Someone who mattered. Someone who made a difference." The words felt true. For the first time since that horrible night in the Hamptons, Vivian felt something stir inside her. Not hope exactly. Not yet. But the faint possibility of hope. The first green shoot pushing through scorched earth. 2 months later, when Oliver had settled into something resembling a schedule, and Vivian could go more than 3 hours without crying, she started digging through her old files. Years of marketing strategies collected during her professional career. Campaign analyses she had saved because she found them interesting. Industry research she had compiled for fun because she loved the work, even when she wasn't doing it professionally. And buried in a folder labeled Ideas, she found it. A business plan, dated 7 years ago. A software platform connecting small businesses with marketing services they could actually afford. She remembered the night she had shown it to Preston. They had been having dinner at home, a rare evening without social obligations. She had printed out the proposal, bound it professionally, presented it to him with nervous excitement. "I've been thinking about this for months," she had said. "There's a real gap in the market. Small businesses can't afford big agency fees, but they still need quality marketing. What if there was a platform that connected them with freelancers and smaller agencies? A marketplace that made professional marketing accessible to everyone?" Preston had glanced at the proposal, flipped through a few pages without really reading them. "That's cute, Viv. Really cute." He had set it aside and reached for his wine glass. "But leave the business stuff to me, okay? That's not really your thing." Not really your thing. She had never opened the file again. Had eventually forgotten it existed. Had buried her ambitions so deep that she couldn't remember having them. Until now. Vivian spent 3 nights refining the plan. The market had changed in 7 years, but the core need was still there. Small businesses struggled more than ever to compete with corporate marketing budgets. The gig economy had exploded, creating thousands of talented freelancers who needed clients. The gap between affordable services and quality results was wider than ever. No one had properly filled it. The opportunity was still there, waiting. On the 4th night, her mother found her at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, surrounded by papers, typing furiously on her ancient laptop. Oliver slept in his bassinet beside her, occasionally making small dreaming sounds. "What are you doing?" Vivian looked up. Her eyes were red from staring at the screen, but they were alive in a way they hadn't been in months. "Starting over." She smiled. It felt strange on her face. Unfamiliar, but good. "I have an idea, Mom, a real idea, and I'm going to make it happen." Dorothy sat down across from her, studied her daughter's face. "How?" Vivian pulled out the check. The $50,000 Preston had called severance. She had cashed it 2 weeks ago, letting it sit in her bank account like a coiled snake. "This," she said, "10,000 for startup capital. 40,000 to live on for a year while I build something. It's not much, but it's a start. And if it doesn't work?" Vivian thought about Oliver sleeping peacefully beside her, about the promise she had made him, about the woman she had been and the woman she wanted to become. "Then at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll know I didn't just give up and let Preston Mercer define the rest of my life. At least Oliver will know his mother fought for something." Dorothy was silent for a long moment. The kitchen clock ticked steadily on the wall. Outside, an owl hooted in the old oak tree. "Your father would be proud." Vivian's father had died when she was 17, heart attack, sudden and devastating. He had been a small business owner himself, a hardware store in their Connecticut town, never rich, never famous, but respected in his community, loved by his customers, happy in a way that had nothing to do with money or status. She had forgotten that there were other definitions of success besides Preston's. "Thanks, Mom. Now get some sleep. You can't build an empire if you're too exhausted to think straight." Vivian laughed. The sound startled her. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed. "An empire? I like the sound of that." The first investor said no. Vivian sat across from him in a sleek conference room in downtown Manhattan, Oliver sleeping in a carrier at her feet. She had prepared for weeks, practiced her pitch until she could deliver it in her sleep, printed handouts with market research and financial projections, worn her best professional outfit, even though nothing really fit right anymore since the pregnancy. The investor was in his 50s, silver-haired and skeptical. He had listened to her presentation with barely concealed impatience, checking his phone twice during her explanation of the market opportunity. "It's an interesting concept," he said when she finished. The word interesting delivered like a polite dismissal. "But the market is too crowded. There are already several platforms doing similar things." "With respect, there aren't." Vivian pulled out a competitive analysis she had prepared. "The existing platforms focus on large enterprises. They charge premium prices and require long-term contracts. My platform targets small businesses with monthly revenue under $500,000. That's a completely underserved market." He didn't look at the analysis. "And your background is in marketing?" "I was a strategic marketing director before my marriage. I developed campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. I understand both sides of this market, the businesses that need services and the professionals who provide them." "But you haven't worked in the field for—" He made a show of checking his notes. "12 years? I've been raising a family." "Right." His eyes flicked to Oliver and his carrier. The judgment was clear on his face. "Look, Miss Crawford, it's a competitive space. You'd need significant capital to make a dent. And frankly, you don't have the track record to justify that kind of investment." "What kind of track record would justify it?" "Experience running a tech company, a network of industry connections, a co-founder with technical expertise." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Come back when you've got a few more pieces in place." The second investor said no for similar reasons. So did the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, and 11th. 11 rejections in 6 months. Vivian kept a tally in her notebook, each no a small wound that scabbed over just in time to be reopened by the next rejection. "The market is too crowded." That was a lie, and she could prove it, but no one wanted to look at her data. "We don't see a clear exit strategy." Translation: they didn't believe a single mother with a pop in her resume could build something worth buying. "Interesting concept, but we're focusing on other sectors right now." Translation: they had already decided no before she walked in the door. "Come back when you're not so distracted." They always glanced at Oliver when they said this. as if motherhood was a disease that impaired judgment, as if caring for a child made her less capable rather than more determined. After the 11th rejection, Vivian sat in her car in a parking garage for 2 hours. She couldn't move. The weight of all those no's pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The concrete walls felt like they were closing in. Oliver slept peacefully in his car seat, unaware that his mother was having a crisis of faith. She couldn't go home. Her mother's hopeful eyes would be waiting. How did it go? And Vivian would have to say it again. No, they said no. Everyone says no. She couldn't stay here either. Sitting in a parking garage until the money ran out wasn't a business plan. She picked up her phone, Googled, how long can you survive on $27,000? Closed the browser before she could read the results. $27,000 left in her bank account. The $40,000 she had set aside for living expenses had dwindled faster than expected. Baby supplies, medical bills, the modest rent she paid her mother to help with household expenses, car maintenance, all the small costs that added up to a terrifying total. 9 months of runway if she was extremely careful. Maybe 6 if Oliver got sick, or the car broke down, or any of the 1,000 things that could go wrong actually went wrong. Her phone rang. Charlie's name flashed on the screen. Tell me something good, Vivian said instead of hello. Lunch, tomorrow. There was someone you need to meet. The restaurant was expensive. One of those farm-to-table places in Tribeca where everything was locally sourced and artisanally prepared and priced accordingly. The kind of place Vivian used to frequent when she was Mrs. Preston Mercer. Now she felt underdressed in her Target blouse and department store slacks, painfully aware of the scuffed heels she hadn't been able to replace. Charlie was waiting at a corner table. Across from her sat a man in his mid-40s. Silver-streaked hair swept back from a thoughtful face. Kind eyes behind designer glasses. An expensive watch that he wore casually, like he had forgotten it was there. Vivian, this is Malcolm Webb. Malcolm, meet the smartest woman I know who hasn't given up yet. Malcolm stood and shook her hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, confident without being domineering. Charlie's been telling me about your platform. I'm intrigued. Vivian sat. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. She had learned through 11 rejections that showing nerves was a death sentence. What exactly did she tell you? That you have a brilliant idea, a solid business plan, and terrible luck with investors who can't see past their own biases. He smiled slightly. I specialize in founders with that combination. They talked for 3 hours. Vivian forgot about the salad she had ordered, forgot about her nerves, forgot about the parking garage breakdown and the mounting rejections in the dwindling bank account. She forgot about everything except the pitch she had given 11 times before. But that suddenly felt new because someone was actually listening. Malcolm asked questions, real questions, hard questions. He challenged her assumptions, tested her market knowledge, pushed back on her financial projections, not dismissively like the other investors, respectfully, intelligently, like he took her seriously and wanted to help her sharpen her thinking. Your customer acquisition cost projections seem optimistic, he said at one point. How did you arrive at these numbers? I modeled 3 scenarios. Vivian pulled out a spreadsheet she had prepared. Conservative, moderate, and aggressive. These projections use the conservative model. I assumed 40% higher costs than industry benchmarks to account for the learning curve of a new platform. Smart. He studied the numbers. And your churn rate assumptions? 8% monthly based on comparable platforms. But I've built in strategies to reduce that. Loyalty programs, bundled services, personalized recommendations based on past performance. For the first time in 6 months, an investor was actually engaging with her ideas instead of looking for reasons to say no. You gave up your career for your marriage, Malcolm said eventually. It wasn't a question. He had done his homework. Yes. And your husband, the one who filed for divorce while you were pigment, he never believed in this idea? Vivian thought about Preston's dismissive smile. Cute idea, but leave business to me. No, he didn't. Malcolm nodded slowly. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. My wife left me 8 years ago, he said quietly. For someone richer, ironically. I was just getting started then, running my first fund out of a cramped office in Queens, living on ramen and working 100-hour weeks. She said I wasn't ambitious enough, that I would never amount to anything. Vivian didn't know what to say. She's on her fourth husband now. Last I heard, she was living in a condo in Boca Raton and posting inspirational quotes on Facebook. He smiled without humor. I'm on my third billion. I'm sorry. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me. Made me realize that the people who doubt us the most sometimes become our greatest motivation. He leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. I want to invest $250,000 in exchange for 12% equity and a seat on your board. The room tilted. Vivian gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. You're serious. I'm always serious about money. His eyes crinkled with warmth. And about people. I've been in this business long enough to recognize fire when I see it. You have fire, Vivian. You've been through hell and you're still standing, still fighting, still believing in yourself when everyone else is telling you to give up. She should negotiate. Every business book she had read said to negotiate the first offer. Push back. Ask for better terms. It established your value. But her throat was tight and her eyes were stinging, and she had been rejected 11 times, and this man was offering her everything she needed. Yes, she said, her voice cracked. Yes, I accept. Malcolm smiled and reached across the table to shake her hand. Welcome to the game, Ms. Crawford. Now let's build something incredible. That night, Vivian pulled into her mother's driveway and sat in the car for 10 minutes, unable to move. Oliver had woken up during the drive home. He was babbling happily in his car seat, making sounds that were starting to resemble words. Mama, mama. He wasn't saying mama yet, but he was getting closer every day. She called her mother. He said yes. Her voice broke on the word. Mom, someone finally said yes. Dorothy made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I knew it. I knew someone would see what I see. $250,000. That's enough to actually build this, to hire developers, to launch a real platform. I told you your father would be proud. Vivian looked up at the house where she had grown up. The white clapboard siding, the green shutters, the wraparound porch where she had spent so many summer evenings dreaming about the future. Those dreams had taken a long detour, but maybe they weren't dead after all. I have to go, Mom. Oliver needs his dinner. Come inside. I made lasagna. We're celebrating tonight. Vivian unbuckled Oliver from his car seat and lifted him to her hip. He grabbed a fistful of her hair and tugged, his version of a greeting. We're going to be okay, she told him as she carried him toward the house. I didn't believe it until today, but I think we're actually going to be okay. 18 months after Malcolm's investment, Ascent had 50,000 users. The name had come to Vivian in the middle of the night, during one of Oliver's colicky episodes. She had been pacing the living room, bouncing him gently, her mind wandering through possibilities. Ascent, because that's what small businesses were trying to do. Rise, climb, reach higher than they ever had before. And that's what she was doing too. The platform had launched 6 months after Malcolm's investment, a simple interface that connected small business owners with marketing professionals, reviews and ratings to build trust, a secure payment system, customer support and available around the clock. The first month, they had 17 users. The second month, 43. By month 6, they hit 5,000. Word of mouth spread like wildfire among small business owners who had been ignored by the big agencies for years. Vivian worked 18-hour days, sometimes longer. She woke at 5, answered emails until Oliver woke up at 7, handed him off to her mother, drove to the small office she had rented in Stamford, worked until 8 or 9 at night, came home, put Oliver to bed, and worked some more until she collapsed. Her mother had essentially become Oliver's primary caregiver. Dorothy took him to the pediatrician, enrolled him in Mommy and Me classes, taught him his first words and celebrated his first steps. The guilt of that ate at Vivian constantly. You're building something important, her mother said, when Vivian tried to apologize for the 100th time. Oliver understands that. He's going to be so proud of you when he's older. He's 2. He doesn't understand anything except that Mommy is never home. He understands that Mommy loves him, That's all that matters right now. The rest will come. But the guilt didn't go away. It just got buried under the million other things Vivian had to worry about every day. Hiring decisions, product updates, customer complaints, server crashes, marketing campaigns, financial projections, board meetings with Malcolm, who pushed her constantly to think bigger, move faster, dream larger. "You're playing too safe," he said during one of their weekly calls. "This platform could be 10 times bigger if you were willing to take more risks." "I can't afford to fail. I have a son to support." "You can't afford not to try. The cautious founders get eaten by the bold ones. That's how this industry works." He wasn't wrong, but Vivian couldn't shake the fear that one wrong move would send everything crashing down. She had lost too much already to risk losing more. Meanwhile, news about Preston filtered in through various channels. Charlie had friends who knew people in his industry. Regina Mercer, Preston's mother, had started reaching out to mutual acquaintances, trying to rehabilitate her family's reputation. Social media posts from people who ran in the same circles painted a picture of a man in decline. Preston's real estate empire was struggling. The market had shifted towards sustainable development and tech-integrated smart buildings. He had dismissed both trends as fads that wouldn't last and refused to adapt. His competitors had surged ahead while Mercer Properties stagnated. Amber's Instagram posts grew increasingly desperate. The yacht photos disappeared, replaced by #sponsored content for discount fashion brands and sketchy supplement companies. Her follower count dropped as the glamorous lifestyle she had been documenting became less glamorous. Vivian knew she shouldn't track these developments. It was unhealthy to monitor her ex-husband's downfall like a spectator sport, but she couldn't help it. Some small, petty part of her wanted to see him suffer the way she had suffered. She wasn't proud of that part, but it existed. "The mansion is on the market," Charlie reported during one of their regular phone calls. "Listed for $14 million, but no one's biting. It's been sitting there for 6 months. Why? Overpriced for the current market, plus word got around about why they're selling. Buyers are superstitious. They don't want to live in a house where everything fell apart." Vivian thought about that house, the marble foyer where Preston had thrown her out, the nursery she had decorated with such hope and care, the bedroom where she had spent so many lonely nights waiting for a husband who was somewhere else with someone else. "I don't feel happy about it," she said, surprising herself. "I thought I would, but I just feel tired." "That's called growth, honey. Revenge fantasies are for people who haven't moved on. You've actually done it." "Have I? Sometimes I feel like I'm still running from him. Like everything I'm building is just a way to prove that he was wrong about me. Maybe it started that way, but that's not why you keep going. You keep going because you love what you're doing, because you're good at it, because Oliver's watching and you want to show him what's possible." Charlie was right. Somewhere along the way, Ascent had stopped being about Preston and started being about the work itself, about the small business owners who sent grateful emails, about the freelancers who found steady clients, about the ecosystem of opportunity she was creating. Oliver was 2 years old now. Walking, talking, getting into everything. His favorite word was why. Why is the sky blue? Why do dogs bark? Why is grandma's hair gray? Why does mommy work so much? That last question hit hardest. "Because mommy is building something," Vivian told him one evening, kneeling down to his level. "Something that will help lots of people." "Why?" "Because helping people is good." "Why?" She didn't have an answer for that one. Not one a 2-year-old could understand anyway. She didn't tell him that she was also building something to prove that she wasn't worthless, that she could succeed without Preston, that the woman he had thrown away was capable of more than he had ever imagined. Those weren't things a child needed to know. 3 years after the divorce, Ascent hit 300,000 users. The platform was profitable. Not massively, but consistently. Revenue grew month over month. Customer retention rates exceeded industry benchmarks. Tech publications had started calling. Requests for interviews piled up in her inbox. "The sleeper success story of the decade," one article called her. "The woman who built an empire after betrayal," said another. Vivian refused every interview that wanted to focus on Preston. Her success wasn't about him. It had never been about him. That was the story she insisted on telling, even when reporters pushed back. But the revenge angle is so compelling, one journalist argued. The wronged wife becomes a millionaire while the cheating husband loses everything. It's perfect narrative. It's also not true. I didn't build a cent to get revenge. I built it because I had an idea that I believed in. My ex-husband has nothing to do with my success or my story. The journalist looked skeptical. Vivian didn't care. But the attention brought unexpected developments. A letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Cream envelope, expensive stationery, a return address in Greenwich, Connecticut. Regina Mercer, Preston's mother. Vivian almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won over caution. Dear Vivian, the letter read, I know I have no right to contact you. I know I failed you when you needed support the most. I chose my son's version of events over your truth. I defended him publicly while he was destroying your life privately. I will regret that cowardice for the rest of my days. But I would like to meet with you, not to apologize for Preston. His actions are beyond any apology I could offer, but to apologize for myself, for my silence, for my complicity in your pain. Please give me 1 hour. I promise I will not waste your time. Against Charlie's strong advice, Vivian agreed. They met at a cafe near Vivian's office. Neutral territory, public setting, safe. Regina Mercer looked older than Vivian remembered. The diamonds that had always adorned her fingers and ears and neck were gone, replaced by simple pearls. Her designer suit was well made but dated, from a season at least 3 years past. The signs of diminished circumstances were subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Thank you for seeing me. Regina's voice trembled slightly. I know I don't deserve even this much of your time. You're right, you don't. Vivian saw no point in pretense. Say what you came to say. Regina took a deep breath. Her perfectly manicured hands, at least she still had those, wrapped around her coffee cup. I believed him. When Preston told me you were unstable, paranoid, making up stories about affairs because you wanted attention. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because admitting that my son was capable of such calculated cruelty meant admitting that I had raised a monster. You did raise a monster. Yes. Tears welled in Regina's eyes. I did, and I spent years making excuses for him. Years dismissing the warning signs. Years pretending that his selfishness was ambition and his manipulation was charm. Vivian waited. There was more coming. She could tell. Preston is broke. Regina's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Completely, utterly broke. He made a series of disastrous cryptocurrency investments, put everything into some scheme that was supposed to triple his money in 6 months. It turned out to be a fraud. He lost everything. Everything? The houses, the cars, the accounts. The company had to be sold to cover debts. The buyers kept the name, but fired him immediately. Regina twisted her pearls nervously. Amber left 6 months ago. The moment the money ran out, she was gone. Took whatever jewelry he had given her and moved in with some hedge fund manager in Connecticut. So the Instagram silence made sense now. Amber had found her next host to feed on. He's been selling assets quietly, Regina continued, trying to save face, but there's nothing left to sell. The Hamptons house finally closed last month for less than half what he paid for it. Even his cars are gone. Vivian should have felt triumph. This was the revenge she had dreamed of during those dark early months. The great Preston Mercer, brought low, humbled, destroyed by his own arrogance and stupidity. Instead, she felt hollow. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know, and because, Regina hesitated, because I think you're the kind of person who wouldn't gloat, who wouldn't use this information to hurt him further, even though he deserves it, even though any pain he feels is less than what he inflicted on you. Vivian thought about Oliver, almost 4 years old now, still asking about his father occasionally. Where is my daddy? Why doesn't my daddy live with us? Does my daddy love me? She never knew how to answer those questions, never knew how much truth a child could handle. What do you want from me, Regina? Nothing, absolutely nothing. I just wanted you to know that you won, Vivian, not through revenge, not through scheming, through becoming someone extraordinary while my son became nothing. She stood, entering her purse. I'll leave you alone now, but for what it's worth, I wish you had been my daughter. I wish I had defended you instead of him. I wish I had done everything differently. She walked out of the cafe. Vivian sat alone with her untouched coffee, watching the door close behind her. The news should have brought satisfaction. She had expected triumph. Instead, she felt something closer to exhaustion. That night, she went home and watched old videos on her laptop. Her wedding, the honeymoon, the early years when she had still believed in happily ever after. She lay in her bathtub fully clothed, the water gone cold, replaying every sign she had missed. The late nights, the business trips, the growing distance that she had attributed to stress and work and the natural evolution of a long marriage. She had let it happen. That was the part that still stung. Not his betrayal, but her own willingness to be blind. Her own eagerness to believe comfortable lies instead of uncomfortable truths. She'd been her own warden, guarding a prison whose door had never been locked. At midnight, she dragged herself out of the tub and went to check on Oliver. He was sleeping peacefully in his small bed, clutching a stuffed elephant she had given him for his 3rd birthday. His face was relaxed, innocent, untroubled by adult complications. "I love you," she whispered, brushing hair from his forehead. "More than anything in the world. And I promise I'm going to give you a good life. A real life. Not the fake perfection I thought I wanted, something true." He didn't wake. She kissed his forehead and went to her own room. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to build something real. Oliver asked about his father for the first time the following week. They were building with blocks in the living room. Vivian had taken the afternoon off, something she rarely allowed herself. But Oliver had been clingy lately, asking for mommy more than usual, and the guilt had finally overwhelmed the work demands. "Mommy?" His voice was casual, like he was asking about dinosaurs or ice cream. "Yes, baby?" "Jacob has a daddy." Jacob was his friend from preschool. "Why don't I have a daddy?" The blocks in Vivian's hands went still. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times, read parenting books about how to handle difficult questions, consulted with a child psychologist about age-appropriate language. Nothing prepared her for how much it would hurt. "You do have a daddy," she said carefully. "He just lives far away." "Where?" "In another city." "Why doesn't he live with us?" "Because he threw us away. Because he never wanted you. Because he's a selfish, cruel man who doesn't deserve to know how wonderful you are." Sometimes mommies and daddies live in different places. It happens in lots of families. She pulled him into her lap. "But you have so many people who love you. Grandma, Auntie Charlie, your teachers at school, me. So much love, Oliver. Does that make sense?" He thought about it with the serious concentration of a 4-year-old confronting a philosophical problem. "I guess." He wriggled free and went back to his blocks. "Can we have pizza for dinner?" Crisis averted. For now. But Vivian knew more questions would come. Harder questions. Questions she didn't know how to answer. "I deserve to tell the truth," she whispered to herself that night, alone in her room. "And he deserves to hear it someday, when he's ready." 4 years after the divorce, Ascent was acquired. $800 million. The number seemed fictional, an amount so large it lost all meaning. Vivian's share, $420 million. The acquiring company was a major tech conglomerate looking to expand into the small business space. They had been circling Ascent for months, making increasingly aggressive offers that Vivian and Malcolm had turned down until the terms were right. "You could have held out for more," Malcolm said after the deal closed. They were sitting in Vivian's office, champagne untouched on the desk between them. "Another year of growth, and we could have doubled the valuation." "I know, but I didn't start this for the money." "Everyone starts it for the money eventually." "Maybe." Vivian looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline. 20 floors below, the city hummed with life. Millions of people pursuing their own dreams, fighting their own battles. "I started it to prove I could. The money is just how we keep score." "So what's next?" "They want me to steer in and CEO run the platform within their ecosystem. I'm negotiating the terms." "What kind of terms?" "Full autonomy, a seat on the main board, and a foundation." "A foundation?" "For women entrepreneurs, women who are starting over, Women who need someone to believe in them when the rest of the world is saying no. She smiled slightly. Maybe we can create a few more ascents. The deal closed 3 weeks later. The terms were better than she had hoped. Autonomy, the board seat, and $20 million in initial funding for the foundation. Headlines celebrated her success. The woman who built an empire after betrayal. From divorce settlement to Fortune 500. The $50,000 revenge. She still refused interviews that focused on Preston. Her success wasn't a revenge story. It was a survival story, a rebuilding story, a story about discovering who she was when everything she thought she knew about herself turned out to be wrong. She bought a house, not a mansion, a 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard and a tire swing and a vegetable garden that needed serious work. The kind of house she had dreamed of as a child. The kind of house Preston would have dismissed as beneath them. She stood in the empty living room on moving day, Oliver's hand in hers. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The hardwood floors creaked under their feet. It smelled like old wood and new beginnings. "Do you like it?" she asked. Oliver ran to the window, pressing his face against the glass. "There's a tree house." "There will be. We're going to build one together." "Really? You and me?" "You and me, and maybe some help from the hardware store, but mostly us." He bounced with excitement, already imagining adventures in a treehouse that didn't exist yet. Vivian felt something unfamiliar in her chest. It took her a moment to identify it. Peace. She'd forgotten what it felt like, the absence of tension. The quiet of not waiting for the next crisis. The simple contentment of standing in a place that was hers, truly hers, with the person she loved most in the world. It terrified her. She had been fighting for so long that she didn't know how to stop. But maybe that was okay. Maybe learning to be happy was just another kind of work, another skill to develop, another challenge to overcome. That night, she tucked Oliver into his new bed. His room was painted blue, his choice. Stars and moons decals covered the ceiling, like the mobile from his nursery all those years ago. "Mommy?" "Yes, baby?" "Are we happy now?" She thought about the question. Really thought. "I think we're getting there." "Good." He yawned, already half asleep. "I like getting there." She kissed his forehead and turned out the light. On her way to her own bedroom, she passed a mirror in the hallway. Stopped. Looked at her reflection. The woman staring back was different from the one who had stood in Preston's foyer 5 years ago. Not just older, stronger, more certain. Still scarred, but healing. Her eyes had light in them again. Life. Not bad, she told her reflection. Not bad at all. Teddy Blackwood walked into her office 2 months later with a look she had come to recognize. Teddy had been her CFO for the past 2 years. Former Wall Street, burned out on the hedge fund life, looking for something meaningful. He was ruthlessly competent, fiercely loyal, and had a talent for delivering bad news without making it sound like the end of the world. This didn't look like routine bad news. What now? Preston Mercer applied for a job. Vivian's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Excuse me?" "Not at Ascent directly, at Catalyst Partners, one of our subsidiaries." Teddy sat down across from her desk. "Entry-level consulting position. He doesn't know we own it. His application came through the normal channels." The room seemed to shrink. Walls closing in, air getting thin. 5 years. 5 years of building. 5 years of proving herself. 5 years of becoming someone who didn't need Preston Mercer's approval or presence or name. And now he was applying for a job at a company she owned. "When did this come in?" "Yesterday. HR flagged it this morning. His resume is..." Teddy hesitated. Not impressive. The gap in employment. The vague descriptions of his consulting work over the past year. Anyone who didn't know who he was would reject it immediately. But they know who he is? The hiring manager recognized the name, did some research, found the old articles about your divorce, figured you'd want to know before any decisions were made. Vivian set down her coffee. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. "What do you think I should do?" "Reject him. Move on. He's not your problem anymore." The logical answer, the obvious answer, Preston Mercer was ancient history, a closed chapter, a lesson learned. But Vivian couldn't stop thinking about Oliver, about someday having to explain why his father never tried to find part of his life, about whether she had taken that choice away by cutting Preston off completely. I want to interview him myself. Teddy's eyebrows rose toward his hairline. That's a terrible idea. Probably, Theo. He's your ex-husband. The man who threw you out while you were 7 months pregnant. The man who tried to destroy you before you'd even given birth to his son. I know exactly who he is. Then why? Vivian turned to look out the window. Manhattan stretched out below her, gleaming towers and rushing traffic. Millions of people living their complicated, messy lives. Because I need to look him in the eye. I need to see what 5 years has done to him. And I need to decide once and for all if there's any possibility of him being part of Oliver's life. And if there isn't, then at least I'll know I gave him a chance. At least I'll know I didn't just dismiss him out of anger. Teddy was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily. I think you're making a mistake. But you're the boss. You want me to set it up? Yes, for next Tuesday. Don't tell him who he's meeting with. Yes, ma'am. After Teddy left, Vivian called Charlie. You're insane, Charlie said when Vivian explained. Certifiably, clinically insane. Maybe. He's going to walk into that office expecting a job interview and find his ex-wife behind the desk. The ex-wife he threw away. The ex-wife who's now worth $400 million while he's applying for entry-level positions. I know. And you think this is a good idea because I think it's a necessary idea. There's a difference, Derecho. There was a long pause on the other end. Do you want me there? No, this is something I need to do alone. Call me the second it's over. Promise me. I promise. The weekend before the interview, Vivian took Oliver to the park. They flew kites, ate ice cream, played tag until they were both breathless and laughing. Mommy, Oliver said as they walked back to the car. Yes, baby? You're fun today, she laughed. Is that unusual? Sometimes you're busy, but today you're fun. The words struck deeper than he could have known. I'm going to try to be fun more often. Is that okay? Yeah. He grinned up at her with ice cream smeared across his face. I like fun, Mommy. She picked him up and swung him around, both of them laughing as the autumn sun slanted through the trees. This, she reminded herself, this is what matters. Not Preston, not the past, this. Monday night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, rehearsing what she would say. I'm not going to hire you. You're not qualified. You destroyed me, and I rebuilt myself stronger than you ever imagined. None of it sounded right. None of it captured the enormity of what had happened between them. None of it expressed the complicated tangle of emotions she still felt, 5 years later, about the man who had promised to love her forever and then thrown her away like yesterday's news. At 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep, went downstairs, made chamomile tea, sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the house settle around her. Tomorrow she would face the man who had broken her, and she would not break again. Tuesday morning, Vivian dressed with deliberate care, a navy Armani suit, understated Cartier earrings, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon that had taken 45 minutes to perfect, heels that added 3 inches to her height and a decade to her confidence. Armor, she thought, studying herself in the mirror. This is armor. She arrived at the office early, answered emails, reviewed contracts, pretended it was a normal day while her heart hammered against her ribs. At 10:45, she pulled up the security feed on her computer. Preston entered the building looking like a shadow of the man he used to be. Thinner, older. The suit he wore was designer but dated, from at least 5 seasons ago. It hung on his frame like he'd bought it for a larger version of himself. His hair was grayer than she remembered. The arrogant set of his shoulders had softened into something closer to defeat. He sat in the waiting area, fidgeting with his watch. The same nervous tell she remembered from their wedding day, from business dinners, from the night he had thrown her out. He checked his phone, crossed and uncrossed his legs, looked at the door every few seconds. At 11 o'clock precisely, her assistant buzzed. Mr. Mercer is here for his interview, Miss Crawford. Send him in. The door opened. Preston walked in expecting a junior hiring manager, some mid-level executive who would review his resume and ask standard interview questions. Instead, he found his ex-wife sitting behind a glass desk that probably cost more than his current monthly rent. Manhattan spread out behind her through floor-to-ceiling windows, $420 million richer than the last time he'd seen her. His face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Shock, confusion, embarrassment, calculation. And there it was, just a flicker, but unmistakable. Contempt. Even now, even broke and desperate, even applying for an entry-level job at a company his ex-wife owned. Contempt. Some things never changed. "Hello, Preston." He recovered quickly. The smooth mask slid back into place, polished by decades of practice. "Vivian?" He nodded as if this were a perfectly normal business meeting, as if they were old acquaintances meeting for coffee instead of a divorced couple, separated by a canyon of betrayal and pain. "I didn't realize this was your company. Please, sit down." He sat, adjusted his cuffs, cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself. I always knew you had potential. Let's proceed with the interview." Vivian kept her voice level, professional, the same tone she used with vendors who tried to overcharge. "Tell me about your recent experience." He shifted in his chair. "Spent 20 years running Mercer Properties. We were one of the largest real estate development firms on the East Coast." "Were." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "The market shifted. There were circumstances beyond my control." "You mean you didn't adapt? Industry publications are quite clear about what happened. The company collapsed because of decisions you made, bad investments, resistance to changing trends, overconfidence in a declining market." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I made mistakes. You lost everything." Another pause. Longer this time. "Yes." Vivian made a note on her pad. She wasn't actually writing anything, just giving herself something to do with her hands, something to focus on besides the surreal nature of this moment. "Why do you want this position?" The question hung in the air. She watched him calculate, weigh options, decide whether to perform or to be honest. "Because I have nowhere else to go." The admission surprised her. She had expected excuses, justifications, some elaborate spin on how his failures were actually strategic repositioning. But this was just raw truth, ugly and unvarnished. "I've been looking for 8 months," he continued. The words seemed to cost him something. "Every door closes when they hear my name. My reputation? My reputation is what it is. But I still need to work. I still need to survive." "Why should I help you with that?" "You shouldn't." He met her eyes directly for the first time. "You have every reason to throw me out of this building. Every reason to make sure I never work again. I destroyed our marriage. I destroyed your life. I deserve whatever comes." "Then why are you here?" "Because I'm desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." He smiled without humor. "I'm sure you remember what that feels like." She did remember. Those early months after he threw her out. The rejection, the fear, the certainty that she would never recover. But she had recovered. She had done more than recover. "I see you've done well," Preston said, attempting to regain some conversational footing. "The acquisition was quite impressive. I followed it in the news." "Did you?" "I was proud of you, actually. Not that my pride matters, but I remember that business plan you showed me years ago, the one I dismissed." He paused. "I should have listened. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for." "Then you gave me credit for?" She repeated his words back to him. "That's an interesting way to phrase it, as if my intelligence was dependent on your recognition." "That's not what I meant. But it's what you said, and it's what you believe. Back when we were married, that my ideas were cute, that business wasn't really my thing, that I should leave the important decisions to you." Preston didn't respond. His fingers twisted around each other in his lap. "You spent 12 years convincing me I was nothing without you," Vivian continued. "You made me believe that my role was to support your success, not to have any success of my own. You systematically dismantled my confidence until I couldn't remember having any. Vivian, and then you threw me out. 7 months pregnant, in the middle of the night, for a 24-year-old with 40,000 Instagram followers. I know what I did. Do you? Do you understand what it felt like to stand in that emergency room, alone, terrified that I was losing my baby, while you were back at the house with her? I've thought about that night every day for 5 years. Have you? Because you never called, not once, not to see if the baby was okay, not to apologize, not to acknowledge that I existed at all. The mask was cracking. She could see it in the tension around his eyes, the way his jaw tightened. What do you want me to say? That I was wrong? I was wrong. That I was cruel? I was cruel that I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too arrogant and selfish to see what I had? His voice broke slightly. I know all of that. I've had 5 years of nothing but time to think about it. And thinking about it has changed what exactly? Everything. Nothing. He spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. I'm not the same person I was, Vivian. I've been through things that would have been unimaginable to me back then. Lost everything I thought defined me. Had to take a hard look at who I actually was versus who I pretended to be. And who were you? A fraud, a man who inherited everything and acted like he earned it. A man who married a brilliant woman and spent 12 years making her feel small so he could feel big. He looked down at his hands. A monster, like you said. Vivian studied him, looking for signs of the old Preston, the smooth manipulator who could convince anyone of anything. She still saw traces of him, the careful word choices, the occasional flash of calculation behind the eyes, the awareness of how he appeared and how he could use that appearance to his advantage. But there was something else too, something she hadn't seen before. Exhaustion, defeat, maybe, just maybe, something approaching genuine remorse. I'm not going to hire you. His head snapped up. Something flickered across his face. Not surprise exactly, more like the confirmation of something he'd already known. I didn't expect you to. I'm not rejecting you because of what you did to me. I'm rejecting you because you're not qualified. She leaned forward slightly. You've never built anything, Preston. You inherited an empire and squandered it. My company needs people who know how to create, not people who know how to consume. He nodded slowly. That's fair. But that's not why I agreed to see you today. Then why? Vivian thought about Oliver, about the questions that would come, about the explanations she would eventually have to give. I wanted to look you in the eye and decide if there's any possibility of you being part of our son's life. The words landed like stones in still water. Preston went very still. Our son, Oliver, he's 5 years old now, starting kindergarten in the fall. He's smart and funny and kind. He loves dinosaurs and space and building things with blocks. Her voice softened despite herself. He asks about you sometimes. Wants to know where his daddy is, why his daddy doesn't live with us. What do you tell him? That you live far away, that sometimes families live in different places. She paused. The truth eventually, when he's old enough to understand, but that day keeps getting pushed back because I don't know how to explain you to him. Preston's eyes were bright, wet. Can I see him? No. Please, just once. I just want to. No, not yet. Maybe not ever. Vivian kept her voice firm. You don't get to appear when it's convenient, Preston. You don't get to play father on your schedule. Fatherhood isn't a part-time hobby you pick up when you're bored or lonely or feeling nostalgic. Then what do I have to do? She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a business card. This is a therapist, a good one. I had her vetted. She specializes in narcissistic patterns, relationship dysfunction, the kind of deep work that actually changes people instead of just teaching them to perform change better. He took the card, stared at it. You want me to see a therapist? I want you to actually change, not perform change, not say the right things while thinking the same thoughts. Actually fundamentally change. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. If, in 2 years, you've done consistent work with her or someone like her, if you've shown real evidence of growth and accountability, then we can talk about supervised visits. 2 years. Oliver is 5. He's young enough that your absence hasn't damaged him permanently. I want to keep it that way. Preston stood. He looked at the card in his hand for a long moment. Why are you giving me this chance? After everything I did, why aren't you just telling me to disappear? Because someday Oliver is going to ask why he never knew his father. And I want to be able to tell him that I gave you every opportunity. She walked to the door and opened it. Goodbye, Preston. He walked toward the door, stopped beside her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry. Not as an excuse, not to get anything from you. Just, I'm sorry for all of it. Then he was gone. Vivian closed the door, leaned against it, let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 5 years. It was over. She had faced him. She had said what needed to be said. She had made the decision that needed to be made. She picked up her phone and called Charlie. It's done. How do you feel? Vivian thought about it, really thought. Empty, but not bad empty. Like I cleaned out a room I'd been avoiding for years, like I finally finished something I should have finished a long time ago. That's good. That's healthy. Is it? I don't feel healthy. I feel exhausted. Sometimes those are the same thing. That afternoon, she left work early, picked up Oliver from his after-school program, took him for ice cream even though it wasn't a special occasion. Why are we having ice cream? He asked, chocolate smeared across his cheeks and chin. Because it's Tuesday. Because I love you. Because sometimes you don't need a reason. He considered this logic and found it acceptable. Mommy? Yes, baby? You seem different today. Good different or bad different? I don't know, just different. Like you were somewhere far away and now you came back. She reached across the table and squeezed his sticky hand. I did go somewhere far away, in my head, but I'm back now, and I'm not going anywhere again. 1 year passed like a montage in a movie. Oliver started first grade. He was reading at a third grade level. His teacher called him exceptional and recommended testing for the gifted program. Vivian walked him to the bus stop every morning, a ritual she protected fiercely. Board meetings got rescheduled. Investor calls got postponed. Nothing was more important than watching her son climb onto that yellow bus, waving at her through the window as it pulled away. The company continued to grow. 20 offices worldwide, 800 employees. The foundation she had started funded 212 women-owned businesses in its first year. Each one felt like a small victory against all the people who had told her she couldn't succeed. She started dating. Daniel Whitmore was a literature professor at Columbia, specializing in 19th century American novels. They had met at a parents' reading night at Oliver's school. He'd been there with his niece, filling in for his sister, who was traveling for work. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a terrible sense of humor that made everyone around him groan. No idea whatsoever who Vivian was until he Googled her after their first date. That's a lot of zeros, he'd said on their second date, referring to her net worth. Does it bother you? Should it? It bothers most people. They either want to use me for a med or they feel inadequate around it. He'd thought about it for a moment. I'm quite confident in my own adequacy, actually. I can't compete with you financially, obviously. But I can recite the entire opening chapter of Moby Dick from memory, so I feel like I bring something to the table. She'd laughed so hard she'd snorted wine through her nose. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't dignified, it was real. Oliver adored him. They built model airplanes together, spending hours at the kitchen table with tiny parts and glue, discussing aerodynamics with the seriousness of engineers. They read comic books and debated which superhero was the best. Oliver favored Spider-Man. Daniel argued for the classic appeal of Superman. They had lengthy conversations about dinosaurs that Vivian couldn't follow but pretended to understand. Daniel never tried to be Oliver's father. He never pushed. He just existed in their lives, a warm and steady presence that asked for nothing except the pleasure of their company. He's good for you, Charlie observed during one of their regular dinners. You're less tightly wound. I wasn't tightly wound. Honey, you were wound so tight I was worried you'd snap. Charlie smiled over her wine glass. It's nice to see you breathing again. The news about Preston came through Regina, who had become an unexpected ally over the past year. Monthly lunches, occasional phone calls. A strange friendship built on mutual regret and cautious hope. He's completed his therapy program, Regina reported during one of their lunches, a full year of intensive work. Individual sessions twice a week, group therapy for men recovering from narcissistic patterns. He's been sober for 14 months. I didn't know he was drinking. Neither did I for a long time. But apparently it started after the bankruptcy, got quite serious before he admitted he had a problem. Regina stirred her tea thoughtfully. He's also working. Nothing glamorous. A small real estate firm in Westchester. Entry-level position, like he was just starting out. How is he doing with that? Surprisingly well. He says it's humbling being the oldest person at the bottom, having to take direction from people half his age. But he also says it's teaching him things he should have learned decades ago. Vivian didn't know what to make of this information. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as performance. Preston had always been good at saying the right things. But another part remembered the man in her office a year ago, the exhaustion in his eyes, the crack in his voice when he apologized. He asks about Oliver every time I see him, Regina continued. Not demanding, not entitled, just sad, like he's mourning something he lost before he ever had it. What do you tell him? That Oliver is thriving, that you're an extraordinary mother, that he should be grateful his son has you, even if that means not having him. A month later, Vivian made a decision. She called the therapist she had recommended to Preston, explained who she was, asked for an honest assessment. I can't share details of our sessions, the therapist said carefully, but I can tell you that Mr. Mercer has been one of my most committed clients. He shows up, he does the work. He's confronted patterns that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Is he different? That's a complicated question. Is he fundamentally a different person? No, we are who we are. But has he developed insight into his harmful patterns? Has he built tools to manage them? Has he shown genuine accountability for the pain he caused? The therapist paused. Yes, all of those things. Whether that's enough for your purposes, only you can decide. Vivian thought about it for 2 weeks. Talked to Charlie, who remained skeptical. Talked to Daniel, who listened without judgment. Talked to her mother, who said, trust your gut. It's gotten you this far. She agreed to a meeting, not a visit, a meeting, at a neutral location, with a child psychologist observing, boundaries clearly established. They met at a park on a Saturday afternoon in October. The leaves were changing, bright splashes of orange and red against the blue sky. Oliver was nervous, picking up on adult tension without understanding its source. You're going to meet someone who wants to say hi to you, Vivian had explained that morning. Someone who knew Mommy a long time ago. Is he nice? I think he's trying to be nice. But if you feel uncomfortable at any point, if you want to leave for any reason, you just tell me and we'll go. Okay? Okay, Mommy. Preston arrived exactly on time. He looked different than he had a year ago. Healthier, more present. He wore jeans and a casual sweater, clothes she had never seen him in during their entire marriage. He approached slowly, carefully, like he was walking towards something precious and easily broken. Hello, Vivian. Hello, Preston. He looked at Oliver. His breath caught audibly. He looks like you, he said softly. He looks just like you. Oliver, this is Preston. Preston, this is Oliver. Oliver studied the stranger with the serious scrutiny of a 6-year-old making important judgments. He took in the nervous posture, the bright eyes, the hands that didn't quite know what to do with themselves. Hi, he said finally. Hi, Preston's voice was rough. I've heard so much about you. Your grandmother tells me you're very smart. I can read chapter books now, big ones. That's amazing. I wish I could read that well at your age. What's your favorite book? Harry Potter, but I've only read the first one. Mommy says the other ones are for when I'm bigger because they get scary. Your mommy is very wise. Oliver seemed to accept this assessment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small piece of quartz. This is my lucky rock. I found it at the zoo. It's special because it has sparkles inside when you hold it up to the sun. Preston looked at the rock like Oliver had handed him a priceless diamond. Can I hold it? Oliver hesitated. The rock was his most treasured possession. He didn't share it with just anyone. Then he nodded. Preston held the rock up to the sunlight. The crystal facets caught the October sun and threw tiny rainbows. It's beautiful, he said. Thank you for showing me. I can see why it's special. He handed it back carefully. Vivian watched from her bench a few feet away, tears hidden behind her sunglasses. The child psychologist sat nearby, observing without interfering. This was painful, awkward, complicated. Everything she had tried to protect Oliver from, but it was also necessary. Someday her son would ask why his father had never been part of his life, and she wanted to be able to say she gave Preston every chance to be different. The visit lasted 30 minutes. They walked around the park, looked at the ducks in the pond, talked about Oliver's school and his friends, and his plans for Halloween. Preston was careful. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. Didn't try to buy affection with gifts or grand gestures. Just existed in his son's presence for the first time since before Oliver was born. When it was time to go, Oliver waved goodbye without much ceremony. That man was okay, he said as they walked to the car. Yeah, he liked my rock. High praise from a 6-year-old. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Vivian sat on her porch with Daniel. How do you feel, he asked. Complicated. Complicated good or complicated bad? She leaned into his shoulder. The autumn air was cool. Stars were coming out overhead. I don't know yet. He hurt me so badly. For years, I dreamed about revenge, about him suffering, about watching him lose everything. She paused. Now he's lost everything, and I don't feel satisfied. I just feel sad for who he was, for who I was, for all the years we wasted being wrong for each other. That sounds like healing, does it? Revenge is about staying connected to the pain. Letting go is about finally moving forward. He kissed her temple. You're moving forward, Viv, whether it feels like it or not. She thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago, broken in a hospital bed, terrified and alone, convinced her life was over. That woman would never have believed she'd be here now, successful beyond her wildest dreams, loved by a good man, mother to an extraordinary child, at peace with her past, even if that peace had come at a terrible price. I waited 5 years to hear him admit he needed me, she said softly. Now that he has, I realize I stopped needing to hear it long ago. Oliver turned 6 in October. Vivian threw him a party in the backyard, 15 kids from his class, a bouncy castle that took 3 hours to inflate, a magician who was terrible but enthusiastic, producing wilted flowers and mangled card tricks that somehow delighted the children anyway. Cupcakes decorated with superheroes that Oliver had helped design. It was chaos. Beautiful, exhausting, perfectly imperfect chaos. Mommy! Watch me! Oliver shouted from the top of the bouncy castle. I'm watching! He launched himself into the air, arms spread wide, landing in a heap of giggles and tangled limbs. Dorothy appeared beside her with a cup of coffee. Decaf, she said, handing it over. You look like you need it. I need something stronger than decaf. Later, after the children leave and you've cleaned frosting off every surface in the house. They stood together, watching Oliver race across the yard, a pack of shrieking kids chasing after him. You've done well, Dorothy said quietly. Mom, I mean it. I don't say it enough. But watching you these past 5 years, watching you become this woman who builds companies and raises children and manages to smile through all of it, her voice trembled. Your father would be so proud. I'm so proud. Vivian pulled her mother into a hug. They stood there holding each other while children shrieked and played around them, the October sun warm on their backs. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, you would have found a way, but I'm glad you didn't have to do it alone. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the mess was cleaned up, and Daniel had kissed her goodbye with promises to call tomorrow, Vivian tucked Oliver into bed. Best birthday ever, he said, already half asleep. Better than last year? Last year didn't have a bouncy castle. Fair point. Next year we'll have to think even bigger. A roller coaster? Let's start with a trampoline and work our way up. She kissed his forehead. He grabbed her hand as she started to leave. Mommy? Yes, baby? Is Preston going to come to my next birthday? Vivian's heart caught. He had started calling him Preston instead of that man. Progress, maybe, or just a child's way of categorizing the adults in his life. Would you want him to? Oliver thought about it with the gravity of a child making a major decision. Maybe. He was nice at the park, and he really liked my rock. Then maybe he can come. We'll talk about it closer to the date. Okay, he snuggled deeper into his blankets. Mommy, are we rich? She laughed. She'd wondered when this question would come. We're comfortable. Why? Jacob said you are the richest mom in school. Well, Jacob doesn't know everything. But are we? She sat back down on the edge of his bed. This was important. The way she answered would shape how he thought about money for the rest of his life. Money is just a tool, Oliver, like a hammer. You can build with it or you can break with it. Some people use money to help others. Some people use it to hurt others. What matters isn't how much you have. What matters is what you do with it. What do you do with it? I use it to build things, like the company I started. And I use it to help other people build their dreams too. Remember the foundation I told you about? The one that helps ladies start their own businesses? He nodded sleepily. That's what money is for. Building, creating, helping. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. And my biggest dream, the thing I'm proudest of building, wasn't a company or a foundation. It was you. Me. You're my greatest success, Oliver. Not the money or the offices or the newspaper articles. You. He smiled, his eyes closing. That's nice, Mommy. It's the truth. She kissed him one more time. Good night, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too. She turned off the light and walked down the hallway. The house was quiet, peaceful, hers. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of wine and stepped onto the back porch. The stars were out in force tonight, scattered across the black sky like spilled diamonds. The same stars she had counted in her mother's garden 5 years ago. Pregnant and terrified and alone, wondering if she would survive. She had done more than survive. She thought about the woman she used to mind knowing, the one who signed a prenup without reading it because love would protect her, the one who gave up her career because her husband's success was more important, the one who shrank year by year, becoming smaller and smaller until there was almost nothing left. That woman was gone. Not dead, don't die dead, but transformed. Her fear had become fuel. Her pain had become purpose. Her broken pieces had been reassembled into something stronger than the original. Preston was part of that story, but he wasn't the hero. She was. She had always been. Her phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. Can't stop thinking about you. Are you free for dinner tomorrow? She smiled, texted back. Tomorrow works. You're cooking. Deal. Fair warning. My risotto is ambitious but occasionally edible. I'll bring wine and backup pizza. Your confidence in my culinary skills is touching. She laughed quietly, setting the phone aside. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the backyard where her son had celebrated another year of life just hours ago. 5 years ago, Preston Mercer had thrown her out, called her worthless, tried to erase her from existence. Now she had everything, and he had nothing. But the strange part, the part she never could have predicted, was that she didn't feel triumphant. She felt grateful. Grateful that he had shown her who he really was, for she wasted another decade. Grateful that she had been forced to discover her own strength. Grateful that Oliver would grow up knowing his mother as a complete person, not as a shadow of someone else. Preston was rebuilding too, in his own smaller way. Maybe he had truly changed, maybe he hadn't. Either way, it wasn't really about him anymore. She was done letting him take up space in her head. Vivian finished her wine, went inside, locked the doors. In the hallway, she passed a mirror, stopped, looked at her reflection. 36 years old, $420 million in the bank, a company that employed hundreds of people, a foundation that was changing lives. One extraordinary child who was growing up kind and curious and brave. One good man who loved her without trying to change her. One mother who had been her rock through everything. Not bad for a woman who started with nothing but a broken heart and $50,000 she'd wanted to throw in Preston's face. The woman in the mirror smiled back. Her eyes were bright, alive, free. You did it, she told her reflection. You actually did it. She turned off the lights and walked toward her bedroom. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more problems to solve, more challenges to face. That was life. That was what she had chosen. But tonight there was peace. Tonight there was gratitude. Tonight, there was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to her and transformed it into the best thing she had ever built. Not the money, not the company, not the foundation, herself. She had rebuilt herself from the ashes of everything Preston had burned. And in the end, she had discovered something she never could have found if he hadn't thrown her away. She had discovered that she was enough, had always been enough, would always be enough. No one could ever take that away from her again. Vivian Crawford climbed into bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be a new day, and she couldn't wait to see what she would build next. And that's the story of a woman who refused to stay broken. Preston threw her away thinking she was nothing. 5 years later, she held his entire future in her hands. But here's the beautiful part. Her victory wasn't about revenge. It was about becoming the woman she was always meant to be. If this story touched your heart, if you felt every moment of her journey, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but it means the world. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in that interview room. Would you have hired him? Would you have let him see his son? And if you haven't subscribed yet, join our family. We share stories like this every week. Stories about strength, stories about survival, stories about women who rise. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who's going through their own storm. Someone who needs to know that their darkest chapter isn't the end of their story. It's just the beginning. Thank you for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next one.